Was Donald Trump's second inauguration the day America's political landscape changed forever? Or was it all just more of the same in new packaging? The Capitol was once again at the center of a seismic shift, bursting with questions, tension, and the hope or dread of what might come next. Some folks called it a triumphant return. Others labeled it a national shock. And no matter which side people took, one thing was crystal clear. The spotlight was back on Donald J. Trump. For months, rumors had swirled about a possible comeback, whispers hinting that behind the scenes, unprecedented alliances were forming. Former rivals secretly holding meetings, tech billionaires slipping past the paparazzi at private dinners, even longtime critics dropping cryptic statements in televised interviews. Now, with the new inauguration day having arrived, the tension reached its peak. Would this be the moment that restored some version of Trump's vision for America, or would it spiral into chaos once again? From the break of dawn, Washington, D.C. exuded an unmistakable buzz of unease. National Guard units milled around the outskirts of the National Mall. Throngs of supporters and protesters alike funneled in from every direction, each group convinced they were witnessing a day that would go down in the history books. The memory of previous turmoil still lingered, casting a long shadow over every conversation. Broad swaths of red-capped enthusiasts chanted in the streets, while quietly determined protesters stood on corners, holding signs to remind the world of lingering questions and unsettled disputes. It was a kaleidoscope of American democracy on full display. The exhilarating and the frightening jammed together in one swirl of energy. One might have expected a subdued environment, given the controversies of the last few years. But that wasn't how things played out. Instead, each passing moment felt like standing on the edge of a diving board, gazing down, unsure whether you'd land smoothly or plunge into deep water. Rumors trickled through the crowd. They said the president-elect is meeting with big tech CEOs behind closed doors, or the outgoing administration might be planning some last-minute drama. Everyone had a theory, and no one knew the full truth. That sense of swirling confusion only intensified the general sense of foreboding. Would old wounds reopen? Or would the transition proceed without a hitch? But that was only half the story. Inside the Capitol, a different kind of anxiety filled the halls, one of careful handshakes, forced smiles, and uncertain alliances. Politicians checked their phones incessantly for any leaked details that might shift the day's events. Some called it a political circus. Others said it was democracy playing out in real time. By mid-morning, the who's who of American politics descended upon the Capitol steps. Everyone expected to see the usual faces: high-profile senators, influential representatives, and the Supreme Court justices decked out in their robes. Less expected were the arrivals of certain big-name billionaires from the tech industry: Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, who had once traded barbs with Trump on social media or in snappy conference interviews. Among the more surprising appearances was a delegation of global business magnates, each rumored to be courting influence with the new administration. Typically, big inauguration events draw major donors and power brokers, but this ensemble raised eyebrows even among seasoned insiders. People whispered that everything from trade policy to the future of online regulation was on the table. Then there were longtime rivals who turned up in silent protest. Some wore expressions that wavered between uneasy acceptance and outward defiance. A few carried themselves as though they were attending a funeral, not a celebration. Journalists tried to fish for quotes, scurrying around like frenzied bees, but nobody was in the mood to speak freely, at least not on the record. Yet perhaps the most talked about sight of all was the cordial greeting between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. The brief meeting preceding the ceremony was almost painfully polite. News cameras captured Biden guiding the Trumps inside for a quick chat and a ceremonial tea, a centuries-old tradition. The handshake, if one could call it that, lasted only seconds, but the significance reverberated through the entire country. Did it signal a surprising gesture of unity, or just a facade to keep up appearances? Right as observers tried to decode that brief exchange, hushed talk spread about who else might show up. Some speculated that former presidents and their spouses, even those who had once called Trump unfit, would appear. Others wondered if public figures who'd condemned him would quietly slip in, not wanting to miss a piece of the historical puzzle. The stage was set for a dramatic day. and the clock was ticking toward the main event. When Donald Trump finally took the podium, an uneasy hush draped over the thousands packed onto the Capitol grounds. Camera lenses zoomed in, capturing every flicker of his expression. Love him or hate him, no one could deny his flair for dramatics. It was a moment brimming with unpredictability. He opened with a booming declaration. America's greatest days are not behind us. They're standing right in front of us. Applause erupted among the faithful, while pockets of the crowd stood firm, arms folded, eyes narrowed in suspicion. Then came the zingers. Trump launched into a litany of complaints about what he called the disastrous last few years, blasting inflation, compromised borders, and so-called woke policies. His tone crescendoed as he vowed to reverse every betrayal inflicted on the American people. Yet it wasn't just the speech's content that stirred conversation. Observers pointed out small but telling details, how he paused as if deliberately waiting for the crowd to catch up, the carefully choreographed cheers, and the pointed references to perceived enemies. For every promise, like lowering gas prices, boosting the economy, and bolstering security, he seemed to throw in a direct jab at Biden's administration. Most dramatic was Trump's promise to reform how big tech controls the conversation. He railed against censorship, hinting at potential legislation or executive orders that would drastically limit how social media companies operate. The tech moguls in attendance, some rumored to be in negotiations with the new administration, sat stoically. Their faces betrayed no hint of the deals or discussions swirling behind the scenes. As the address came to a close, the crowd broke into roaring applause from one side, while scattered boos erupted from the other. Reporters scrambled to analyze the speech in real time, rushing to be the first to tweet out key quotes. But this was just the beginning. Behind the stage's patriotic bunting and the booming orchestral music, the real drama was poised to begin the moment the cameras turned away. Not an hour had passed since Trump's oath of office when news outlets began breaking stories of swift executive actions. Sources close to the new president whispered about a stack of orders on his resolute desk. Several were rumored to roll back environmental regulations, restart major pipeline projects, and limit certain federal spending on social programs. Others targeted the tech industry, from clarifying Section 230 laws to opening the door for greater government oversight. Then came the shocker, wave after wave of pardons. On the outgoing side, Biden had preemptively issued blanket pardons for several family members, an act that caught many by surprise. Critics decried it as a move to shield them from possible politically motivated investigations. The reaction was swift and polarized. Some said it was a final abuse of power. Others claimed it was a necessary safeguard against vindictive political retaliation. Trump himself wasted no time announcing his own wave of pardons, some for individuals who had stuck by him during past legal battles, others for lesser-known figures rumored to hold valuable secrets. Speculation ran wild. Were these just loyalists being rewarded? Or was Trump covering his bases to maintain loyalty within the ranks? The immediate impact was electric. Social media exploded with hashtags like #PoundPardonPandemonium. Cable news outlets dedicated entire segments to dissecting the legality, ethics, and historical precedent of these moves. In bars, living rooms, and cafes across America, the conversation was the same. Have we entered a new era of pardons as political currency? While the talking heads on TV analyzed every angle, Trump got right back to work. Another round of orders was rumored to be in the pipeline, each one aimed at swiftly undoing the legacy of his predecessor. It was clear to everyone observing that this wasn't just a passing headline. It was the start of a fundamental shift in America's governance, for better or worse. But that wasn't the whole story. Even as the ink dried on those documents, new controversies bubbled beneath the surface. Politicians who had once condemned Trump's policies found themselves cornered, forced to choose between public outcry and private alliances. And nobody could ignore the looming presence of certain high-powered moguls who seemed to be pulling invisible strings from behind the curtains. Tech billionaires have never been strangers to power, but this time, they seemed more overtly involved than ever. Elon Musk, for instance, had once stirred up social media battles against Trump's policies, only to appear on the inauguration guest list. Some said Musk was angling for more favorable regulations around space exploration or electric vehicles. Others claimed it was all about controlling social media narratives. Right alongside him was Mark Zuckerberg, who'd faced heated scrutiny for how Facebook, now rebranded into a sprawling meta empire, handled the previous election cycle. And then there was Jeff Bezos, a longtime skeptic of Trump's leadership, who nonetheless sat in a VIP row. Rumor had it that Bezos wanted to secure Amazon's government contracts, especially those tied to cloud storage and defense. But no figure raised more eyebrows than the rumored presence of TikTok's top executives, who quietly slipped in without fanfare. Not long ago, their platform had been threatened with bans and forced sales. Now, word on the street was that secret negotiations were unfolding, with potential deals to ensure the app's future in the US. For each handshake or half-smile captured on camera, observers debated whether it signaled a blossoming friendship or a precarious truce. Outside the glare of the cameras, aides and lobbyists scurried through back channels. People whispered about dinners at upscale hotels, exclusive gatherings in private mansions, places where deals were made in hushed tones. Trump's feud with the mainstream media also took on a renewed vigor. White House correspondents found themselves under stricter guidelines. Press briefings hinted at major changes to how social platforms operate, though details remained sparse. Supporters cheered, hopeful that conservative voices would no longer face what they perceived as unfair silencing. Critics argued that Trump's moves posed a threat to freedom of expression if the power to regulate speech landed solely in political hands. In short, the inauguration day was the tip of the iceberg. The real wars, battles over user data, content moderation, and who gets to shape the narrative were just beginning. And with so many powerful interests converging, the lines between politics, technology, and personal ambition were poised to blur in ways Americans had never seen before. As news of executive orders and potential tech clampdowns spread, the public responded with an almost manic intensity. Streets across major cities erupted in both celebration and protest. Trump loyalists, elated by the new direction, marched with American flags, chanting slogans about reclaiming national pride. Meanwhile, critics mounted large-scale demonstrations, arguing that freedoms were in jeopardy. Social media brimmed with heated debates. One viral post showed a side-by-side comparison of Trump's new orders with those of his first term, sparking claims that he was doubling down on policies once deemed too extreme. Another widely shared video captured emotional testimonials from small business owners who believed the new administration's economic pledges would finally bring relief. Mainstream news outlets, fresh off covering the inauguration, scrambled to keep up with rapidly changing events. Cable news personalities were split. Some hailed Trump's return as a chance to restore what they called America's rightful place on the global stage, while others warned it could deepen divisions that the country had yet to mend. Prominent activists, including those from movements that had opposed Trump in years prior, took to the airwaves. They warned that the swift changes could set back civil rights, environmental protections, and diplomatic relations. On the other side, administration spokespeople contended that this was a chance to right the ship after what they described as the disastrous wave of misguided policy. Online, hashtags like #WelcomeBackTrump and #ResistForty5 again competed for top trending spots. Every corner of the nation was abuzz with the question, is this the fresh start supporters claim, or a troubling redo of old tensions? But even the loudest voices on social media couldn't drown out the cynicism of everyday Americans who just wanted stability. "I'm so tired of the fighting," one viral tweet read. "I don't care who's in office as long as they do something real for people like us." That sentiment, expressed in countless variations, hinted that while the drama raged on in Washington, average families were focused on their own problems, paying bills, finding decent health care, and keeping their jobs secure. Still, as night fell, the uproar felt far from over. Political pundits predicted the administration's next moves would arrive sooner rather than later, each announcement fueling another wave of clashes on the streets and online. The emotional roller coaster that began on Inauguration Day showed no signs of slowing down. Meanwhile, the world watched with bated breath. Foreign leaders who'd once held Trump at arm's length scrambled to reassess, Was the new presidency merely a continuation of his first term's policies, or would he adopt a more extreme stance given his renewed mandate? Europe, already battered by its own economic and political rifts, worried about potential disruptions to trade deals. Several European leaders were rumored to be planning emergency summits to discuss how to handle the new White House occupant. Some whispered that the European Union might try to unify against aggressive U.S. trade tariffs, while others quietly sought backdoor negotiations with Trump's team. Across the Pacific, Asian markets reacted sharply. Investors in Japan and South Korea watched the unfolding inauguration drama with a mix of curiosity and anxiety. China, once a focal point of Trump's trade wars, remained tight-lipped in official statements, leaving analysts to speculate whether a second Trump term would intensify old conflicts or usher in a shaky detente. Then there was the Middle East, where leaders pondered whether Trump would return to the same style of foreign policy that had shaken the region before. Different nations weighed how best to approach the new administration, some considering more direct cooperation, others bracing for confrontation. Even America's closest neighbors, Canada and Mexico, found themselves in a precarious position. Talks of renegotiating trade agreements like the USMCA sparked concern. Would this be an opportunity for favorable tweaks, or a repeat of heated negotiations that previously left everyone on edge? International news networks carried every second of the inauguration, dissecting each line of Trump's speech for hidden clues. Analysts spoke of a reset button that might be slammed without much subtlety. Allies questioned whether the new White House team would maintain old commitments. Adversaries weighed the risk of reigniting tensions. In every capital across the globe, politicians and diplomats huddled over briefing papers, trying to read between the lines and guess what this second act of Trump's presidency would bring. Almost as soon as Trump wrapped his inaugural address, hushed conversations sprang up across Washington. Some insiders claimed that classified documents relating to national security crises, unresolved from the previous administration, were being shuffled around in secret. Others reported that the new president was preparing a sweeping cabinet reshuffle that would mix old loyalists with a few wildcard picks. Conspiracy theories took root in the public sphere, too. One set of rumors suggested that certain pardons had been traded for silent compliance on sensitive issues. Another story circulating online held that foreign lobbyists had infiltrated high-level White House meetings. Critics accused Trump of pulling strings behind the scenes to consolidate power quickly, while allies insisted he was just cleaning up the political mess he'd inherited. Even more intriguing were the murmurs about possible legal battles yet to come. People asked whether old lawsuits might resurface, or if new investigations could be launched against those previously considered untouchable. Whispers of prior accusations, those that had shadowed Trump's first presidency, never fully disappeared. Some believed these controversies would roar back with a vengeance. Others thought they'd be quietly buried in exchange for political favors. Though official statements remained vague, each day dripped new tidbits into the public domain. Leaks from staffers hinted at abrupt policy announcements on everything from healthcare reform to a possible re-entry into international pacts that the previous administrations had left or renegotiated. Then again, nobody could be sure which rumored moves were real and which were disinformation campaigns aimed at sowing chaos. One thing was certain: with Trump back in the driver's seat, the political machinery of Washington was revving at full throttle. And as the city's engine roared, no one could say for sure what fresh twist might erupt next. Beyond American borders, the headlines read like something out of a political thriller. Second Trump era begins. Will global markets survive? Allies scramble as Washington power resets. Observers saw the immediate aftermath in real time: currency fluctuations, global stock market hiccups, and renewed debates on climate policy. European nations looked to Germany and France for a coordinated reaction, uncertain whether to double down on climate agreements or wait for signals from the White House. Some in the EU quietly floated the idea of forging deeper ties with Asia, hoping to form a buffer against any abrupt moves from Trump. Meanwhile, Russia's president made a cryptic statement about new partnerships, sparking a frenzy of speculation over whether the historically tense US-Russia relationship might morph into an unexpected alliance. In the Middle East, certain governments signaled eagerness to resume deals that had once been lucrative, while others condemned Trump's return as a recipe for further unrest. Back in the US, these international developments added another layer of drama. When the global stage shifts, domestic politics can't help but respond. Congressional leaders, many of whom had pinned their legacies on forging or resisting Trump's earlier policies, suddenly found themselves rewriting their political playbooks. Would the new administration ramp up a muscular foreign policy, or had the upheavals of the last few years taught the White House a lesson about measured diplomacy? Pundits debated, patriots rallied, and critics wrung their hands. But no matter how loud the conversation got, the reality was inescapable. A seismic change had rippled across the globe, and everyone was adapting on the fly. After hours, days, and weeks of nonstop breaking news, a single question echoed across the nation: where do we go from here? The second inauguration of Donald Trump had delivered on its promise of spectacle and controversy, leaving Americans and the world wondering what the next 4 years would bring. Would Trump's policies rekindle old feuds, or would he finally forge a path that his critics could respect? The onslaught of executive orders, the swirling rumors of behind-the-scenes deals, and the divided public mood all pointed to a new chapter in U.S. history. Some called it an era of bold disruption. Others feared it might dismantle decades of hard-fought progress. Meanwhile, families trying to pay rent and keep their dreams alive had their own concerns. They were less interested in political drama and more focused on whether the promises of prosperity would ever trickle down to them. In the end, this story is just beginning. Love him or hate him, Donald Trump's return demanded the world's attention and forced a recalibration of alliances from Capitol Hill to foreign capitals. So as the parade confetti settles and the White House curtains are drawn shut, one mystery remains. Is America on the cusp of reclaiming a golden age or spiraling into another round of bitter conflict? Only time will tell. Until then, keep questioning everything and sharing your thoughts, because the biggest shockers, scandals, and revelations may still lie ahead. Thanks for watching and stay curious. Whatever happens next, it's bound to be a ride unlike any other.